Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Paranormal Question of the Day. We'll be right back right after a short intro. Hey everyone, this is Darren Buss with Paranormal Question of the Day. Tonight's guest is To Stewart. He is a comedian, plus a former member of Rise Up Paranormal. He also has a podcast called My Paranormal Story, which you can find on Spotify, iTunes, and whichever radio you listen to. We'll learn more about Tom and his paranormal stories. Also, at the end of the broadcast, he's going to share one of his stories with us. So stay tuned, grab some coffee, grab some soda, get some popcorn. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're coming up next. And we are back. So, I hope everybody's having a good Monday. I know my week is going to be short, so I'm happy. It's Christmas vacation coming up. And, yeah, Taryn will be in momentarily when she gets home from work. Anyhow, tonight we have a special guest with us. We have Mr. To Stewart. How you doing, sir?
What's up, Darren? How are you?
Doing good, doing good.
Glad to be here.
So yeah, it's one of those days where it's rainy out by you. It was kind of really cold by us.
It was like a hurricane where I am. I'm up in New England, up in Massachusetts, south coast, south of the Cape. And it was like 60-mile-per-hour winds today and like 2 inches of rain all day today. I was like, I don't know if I can do the podcast tonight because I might not have power or internet. But somehow it missed me. You know, I mean, we still got the wind and the rain, but it didn't take any power out, thankfully.
Absolutely. So we have Lori. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, Lori.
So Lori is the creator, caretaker, or whatever. I always say it wrong. Of the museum that we do haunted paranormal stuff there. So.
Oh, cool. What kind of museum is it?
We have is the Washoe County Historical Museum. And with that, Wisconsin, are you familiar with, hey, Penny, with serial killers in Wisconsin, like Ed Gein?
Oh, yeah, I know who that is. Yep.
So he was held there for 4 nights and 3 days. And so his spirit and his mother's Augusta spirit is there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have many other spirits besides those two that people like to go right to Ed Gein stuff, but we are like, hey, we got children's spirits here, we got other spirits here, and so we got a whole host of spirits, but it's a great museum.
Interesting.
We also have a schoolhouse that's about a mile up the road.
Mm.
A lot of good children's spirits there as well, and but for the most part, it's the museum is one half is a house with an upstairs and downstairs basement, and the other half is a story jail.
So, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I was fortunate to fall into my lap, and so far it's worked out really good. I was finish off strong this year, and next year is going to be a hopefully a good turnout for the start, which we do a Valentine's investigation in February, and which is open to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, the season pretty much starts every weekend.
Very romantic.
Yeah, right.
Yep. Very cool.
So, all right. Yeah, pushed into your lap. Yeah, if you want to call it that, pushed in my lap. There was other things that was going on that kind of pushed it to my lap. But other than that, so Mr. To Stewart, you want to tell the fine folks in the chat room that who you are and why you got into the paranormal?
Sure. Well, I've had a lifelong interest in the paranormal and strange things since I was a young kid. I had many experiences throughout my life. And 5 years ago, I decided to start a podcast and just tell some of those stories. And as I started doing that, I started remembering some of the other experiences that I'd had that I didn't even remember until then. So stories kept triggering other stories, and before I knew it, I've been doing a podcast for 5 years now, and I've got something like 70 something stories up there for people to binge and listen to, and they're all just short stories and everything. Some of them are also based on experiences I had as a paranormal investigator. I used to investigate with Rise Up Paranormal in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And we used to do a lot of residential cases, but we also went to some very historic and haunted places around New England. Many of them you've probably seen on TV before. Many places that the ghost hunters and taps had been to before. And a few times we actually investigated with taps on some of these locations. So I tell some of those stories too, from my case files from being with Rise Up Paranormal. And then a couple of years ago, I just started getting back into investigating again, maybe like a handful of times a year now. And so I like to tell those stories on the podcast too, and then go around to other people's podcasts and tell my stories as well.
Yeah, that and I caught up with your podcast, so I was actually at work, and I was like going through all these podcasts. Like, I gotta find something while I'm peeling tape. And
Hmm.
then I came across yours. I'm like, let's start this one, and that's what I like about it. They're short and to the point, but you tell a really good story about leading up to the end, and that's what I
Hmm.
like. Um, it's not like all over the place. Like some stories kind of go all over the place.
Hmm.
Um, so that's why I just like, yeah, I can stick with this one.
Oh,
So,
yeah, I'm glad you like it. I mean, I tried to put some of my writing skills into it and some of my broadcast experience into it and try to make it, sound really good. I was influenced by podcasts like Lore. I don't know if you've ever heard of
yep.
Aaron Mahnke and his podcast Lore. I was very influenced by his and the way he told stories. So yeah, so it's similar to that, and I'm glad you like it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And hopefully tonight, those of you in chat will start listening to his podcast, and you can find it on Spotify and iTunes and whatever internet radio you choose to listen to.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere. It's on
So,
YouTube as well, and
yep.
all those spots.
So, so what was your one of your favorite locations that you like to investigate?
Oh, I had a few that I really, really loved. Some that still, I think about to this day. One of my favorites would be Belcourt Castle, which is located in Newport, Rhode Island. That was featured on the TV show Ghost Hunters at one time. We got called in there. This is when I was with Rise Up Paranormal. We got called in there by the owner. She would usually host some, ghost tours during the Halloween season, but I think she was trying to just kind of getting tired of doing it, or maybe getting a little too old to do it. So she thought it would be interesting to bring a paranormal team in to host them. And so she asked us if we'd be interested, and we basically said, yeah, we'd be interested in doing that, but we would like to have it to ourselves for a couple of nights before we bring in outsiders, just so we can kind of get a feel for the place.
Hmm.
And it was quickly and easily one of the most haunted places I ever investigated. There was just so much activity everywhere, from EVPs to objects moving, doors opening and closing. And it was so full of legends and everything too, but we caught numerous EVPs there. And it was just an amazing, I mean, when I say it was a castle, it's like a castle. It has huge ballrooms and music rooms and, like a dozen bedrooms, and it's got tunnels that lead out to different places, and she had it filled with antiques and stuff from all over the world. She had suits of armor, she had jade statues made from artists in Japan, and she had a tea set that belonged to Napoleon, and just it was like Scooby Doo came to life. This place, it was unbelievable. And every time I was in there, I just loved being there, because most of the time the activity wasn't scary. It was just paranormal and just so interesting. And we ended up spending a whole summer hosting ghost hunts, walkthroughs with people. And what we would do is we would break them up into groups every weekend. We'd have different people. We'd break them up into groups and send them to different areas, let them investigate with one of us for an hour or so, bring them back, have them write down what they experienced, if anything. And then we'd send them off to another section and just let them all kind of rotate throughout the night. And then we would collect all those sheets that they filled out of everything they experienced in all the different locations. And we did that every weekend consecutively for a summer. And we compiled all that data from all these different people, none of them who had ever met each other, none of them who had any idea of what to expect in there, much less where. And we found time after time, many people were having the same situations happen to them, the same experiences happen in the same locations of the castle. And that always blew me away. Like
Wow.
one of the regular things that would happen was there was a room called the music room, and this was the room where the children of the original family would learn how to play music. They'd learn how to play piano or harp or something like that. And whenever we would bring people in there, always some woman with long hair would have her hair tugged. And it happened several times. And week after week, that would be the experience of some woman would have had her hair tugged. And we would catch it on our camera. You'd see her flinch. A couple times they blame their boyfriend and smack him for it, thinking that he was trying to scare her, and it wasn't him. And that was just one of many examples of things that just kept happening. And it can't be coincidence once that starts happening all the time in the same places, the same situations. We had people catch EVPs, different people from different groups at different times would catch EVPs, and it sounds like the same voice. Sometimes it's saying the same thing. That place blew me away with the activity that was in there.
Wow. Interesting. Tom Stewart, Taryn Kerper,
Hey, Taryn.
Tom Stewart.
Hi, how are you? Sorry I'm
Nice
late.
to meet you. That's
that's
I am
okay.
actually on my phone right now because my laptop is like just wigging out. So I'm gonna switch over once I get it finally up. I'll switch back over to my computer, but I'm on my
Awesome.
phone for right now. So I apologize for being late. My internet's is wonky.
The East Coast
It
got hit
happens.
pretty hard.
So I apologize. If you could just give me just a brief little, I apologize to everybody watching too. I'm sorry,
Sure.
but if you could just give me a little brief of just the introduction of where you're from and all that stuff, just really
Mhm.
quick. Sorry.
Yeah, that's no problem. I'm originally from Rhode Island. I live in Massachusetts now, not too far from Rhode Island. And I was a paranormal investigator for many years with Rise Up Paranormal. I was paranormal enthusiast most of my life since I was a teenager, explored many different places growing up, lived in a haunted house for a while as an adult, which is what made me want to become an investigator. And when I joined Rise Up Paranormal, we had the privilege of being able to investigate just dozens and dozens of legendary haunted and historic places around New England. Not to mention, we had the ability to help many families in residential cases along the way. And
Awesome.
on my podcast, every episode, I just tell one of my stories from my past, whether it be a
That's awesome.
personal story or an investigation story.
And how long's it been on?
5 years now. I just celebrated
Oh,
5
good
years.
for you. Good for you.
Thank you. Yeah. I never expected to last that long. And
Same.
honestly, I never expected to have that many stories.
Yeah, no,
So
that's great. That's
what
fantastic.
ended up happening is I would be, sitting down trying to, put one of my stories down, and then it would click something. Oh, I remember a time when something else happened, and I'd be like, oh, I should tell that story next. And then I take some notes, and before I know it, I have another story. So
Yeah.
they just kept triggering memories for me. When I was growing up, a lot of the things I experienced, I didn't realize were paranormal. I just thought they were normal. I just thought everybody saw or felt or
Yeah.
had these types of things happening around them. So,
Yeah.
it wasn't until I was an adult that I started to realize, oh, there's stuff going on around us that most people aren't aware of.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
That's cool. I remember I celebrated 5 years ago, like 5 years, 2 years ago. So I'm going
Mhm.
rounding on to my 7th year, and it
Awesome.
really is quite an accomplishment. So kudos to you because
Thank you.
and here's the other thing too. The more that you investigate, even with some less tricky and more relaxed private houses, you could always incorporate those into your stories, change names and stuff like that with those. But
Yeah.
you're always going to have stories as long as
Mhm.
you're investigating. Your
Yep.
story doesn't just stop with your past. You know what I mean? You can continue to
Right.
tell all your stories, which is
Yep.
cool.
Yeah. And I had stopped investigating for a while. I just started again like 2 years ago, and it's only a few times a year. I don't do it a lot anymore. I just have so many other things going on in life. But some of the recent ones I've had have become stories on the podcast too, just because they've been so interesting.
That's
You
cool.
know, yeah.
So where is your podcast at?
You can find it pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts: Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. I've put it on all the channels, so
Cool.
it's out there. Yeah.
That's awesome. And are these live? Are they live shows or?
Nope, they're not
Oh,
live
cool.
shows. They're
Okay.
just recorded shows. It's just me narrating a story.
That's
That's all
cool.
it is. There's
I
no
like that.
guests. There's no interviews. Yeah, it's just if you just want to hear, it's kind of like sitting at a campfire listening to someone tell you a spooky story.
That's cool.
That's
I'm
basically what it is.
gonna subscribe to it because I'm interested in hearing some of it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's
That'd be good.
something different, it's not something
Mhm.
that you really hear of.
He
So
also does Q&As too when he gets through certain run of stories, and he'll start doing Q&As and go back to stories. I believe you
Yeah,
have
every
3 of
once in a
those.
while. Yeah, every once in a while, I like to break up the stories with a Q&A episode or something else interesting. Because it's hard to produce these because I'm a one-man show. So, I have to remember,
absolutely.
write it, record it, edit it, score it, produce it, promote it. So I try to do one a month, but I also try to do a second episode every month that's not a story, but it can be something else. It can be a Q&A, or it can be, I went to Zach Baggins Museum, so I did an episode about that.
That was good.
I try to just do some bonus content in there. So
Yeah, and
that,
then you can just
so,
publish it as an audiobook.
yes. Well, I'm actually turning the podcast into a book of short stories. I'm probably going to take like 20 or the 25 of my favorite stories and expand on them, add some things like pictures and stuff, and put it into a book and just make it like a book of short stories based on the podcast stories.
That's
So,
awesome. Okay, time out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hang up from my phone. I'm gonna come into my laptop.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm finally up. All right, I'll see you guys in a second.
All right.
Now, speaking of books, you do also have a first book out you did write.
Yes.
Is the 10 most things you want to take along on, and
the 10 best tools for ghost hunting.
Yes.
They're in my opinion the 10 best gadgets you should use if you're going to be a ghost hunter or go out doing a ghost hunt. And that was my little pandemic project. I was like, I want to write a book, but what should I write about? So I wrote about what I knew. So I know people love lists, so I decided to write a book and just give my opinion of what the 10 best tools are for ghost hunting. And I'm actually doing a companion book now. I'm about halfway through it. It's the 10 worst tools for ghost hunting, which might be more fun because that'll piss off a lot of people.
No, I like that. I like that you did both sides of it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That was the intentions in the beginning, and I just never got around to the second book. So I've been kind of forcing myself for the past couple months to just sit down and write one chapter every week. Because I already had the preliminary lineup and everything, so I'm in the process of doing it now.
That's awesome.
Hopefully early next year with that.
So you're a healthy skeptic, which is good.
Yes.
Yes. That's
I've been told I'm a skeptic believer, which I definitely agree with. I'm the type of person where if I didn't experience it, then I can't give it any credibility.
Right.
You probably experienced it and you believe in it, and that's great. I won't tell you you're wrong, but I can't say that you're right because I can't ever say something was really paranormal unless I was there to witness it and and see what the environment was like, how controlled it was, things like that.
That's true. That's true. Well, also another side to that is that, a lot of this stuff that we experience is interpretation, right? So even if me and you are in the same place and we experience, something happens, we may interpret that differently.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So the industry is full of opinions, and that's what I like about it, because you can share your opinion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always felt that the paranormal itself is sometimes only trying to be seen by certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could have a room full of people and only a few of you witness this, while a few of you didn't witness it, and no one can explain why. So, maybe some people are more sensitive than others. Maybe it's a biological thing, or maybe the spirit just said, hey, I only want to talk to the women in this room, so I'm not going to manifest in front of the men. Who knows? But
Yeah.
you know,
I mean,
when I was
go
when
ahead.
I was investigating, I was known as the skeptic in the group. So anytime somebody felt like they had something paranormal, I'd be like, I would name 5 things that I think it could be that's not
Yeah.
paranormal.
Yeah.
So, so we would butt heads a lot, but I think you need that on every paranormal team. You don't want to just jump to the paranormal all the time.
No,
Right,
because
right.
not everything is paranormal.
Right. And I lean heavy on science. I lean heavy on not using devices that are power of suggestion and things. So I upset a lot of investigators when I say I don't believe in ghost boxes.
I
I
don't
don't
use
believe
that
in
stuff.
that kind of spirit communication like that. I believe in very few spirit mediums. So those are some of the things that'll be in my new book of the 10, what I think are the 10 worst tools.
Yeah.
Now the Belcourt Castle you're talking about. Now the system, how you said you ran it for that summer. Now that was straight up all scientific, and I
Yeah.
love it how each one came up with the same thing all the time, because it's very hard to come up with the same result every time.
Yeah, that's one of the problems with paranormal research, is that you can't duplicate things, you can't test them, you can't control them in any sort of a lab type environment. So the fact that we had this place to ourselves for a whole summer, for about, close to 3 months, we were able to do basically a case study. And some of the things that we experienced and that we felt, we brought in complete strangers, didn't tell them anything that we already knew. And some of them had the same experiences. Week after week, we would be seeing it happening. And there was literally no other direction for it to go except paranormal. Like, we were basically able to eliminate things, because the circumstances were always different. They were different people. It was different times of the year. It was a different weather outside. But it was always the same experiences in the same places in the building. So, and a lot of it we caught on video, a lot of it we caught on audio. So, for me, I think that's the way paranormal investigation needs to be, is you need to be able to do some sort of a case study for a place that you just really, really are sure is haunted. It's really hard to just go in one night or 2 nights and determine something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't predict when paranormal things are gonna happen, so
Yeah.
you
I
have to have time.
literally made the mistake of watching, I love the show Unexplained with William Shatner. Love
Oh,
that
yeah.
show.
Yeah.
And I watched The Time Traveler. They did a show on time travel. And the way they explained it on that show, the time slips, where people would, a lot of times it sounded a lot like what we describe as like either seeing spirit or spirit activity, or seeing residual stuff. When we think we see the soldiers walking across the field in Gettysburg, what I mean? Like, are we really seeing that, or is that a time slip? Or, this time slips really happen? You know what I mean? It was crazy. The show.
That's 100% one of my theories as to what's happening, is that it's a quantum physics, different universes crossing over for a quick second or two type of thing, whether it's residual or whether there are, some kind of quantum physics entities that are able to cross over. They know how, but we just don't yet. Something like that. It would explain a lot of things paranormally, not just ghosts, but it could explain Bigfoots and all kinds of cryptids. It could explain elements. It could explain, everything that we think of as angels and devils and demons and aliens. Like, all kinds of stuff could be explained by a quantum physic type of string theory.
Absolutely. It's crazy, but it scares the shit out of me, because then, because right now, we feel like, a lot of us feel, or believe that, maybe we have captured evidence of the afterlife, right? So you sleep at night knowing, that there is an afterlife. So it's like, okay, the fear of death kind of like, gets a little less. But if you were to, explain all
that
that
so
stuff,
much for me, though. I still fear death.
I do too. not saying that, but
No, I know what you're saying.
knowing the possibility that there's like an afterlife for sure. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're a little less, you're like, oh cool, I'm gonna see my dad. You know what I mean? Like that
Mhm.
theory in our heads like kind of makes this process a
Yeah,
little
that we're gonna be with our family and our
yeah,
friends and
yeah,
the
So
dog that we had when we were kids and whatever.
right.
Yeah, I mean that the belief in the afterlife is something that's been with humanity since since
Ever.
they could speak. I mean going
Yep,
all the way back past the Egyptians
absolutely.
and all of that, and just about every person on this planet has had some sort of an afterlife belief. They've believed in spirits. They've believed in coming back as reincarnation or something.
Hmm.
So maybe there is some truth to it. If so many human beings have believed it for hundreds of and thousands of years, there must be something to it.
Yeah,
The energy of our body must go somewhere.
yeah.
And
So
and the thing is too is you look at past lives and past lives regressions and stuff like that too, because I've always had this thing where I run up the stairs and my wife says like, "Why do you run up the stairs?" Because I feel like something's coming at me from behind. And from what I was
mhm,
told before, that in a past life regression is that I was a soldier in a past life and I was killed from behind. So
mm,
that's kind of where it comes from, this, where I'm always feeling something's behind me,
Hmm.
you know.
interesting. Yeah.
And it's just one of those things too. And you look at that, and what are your thoughts about portals in a way? Do you feel that that's being misused too much or an overkill? Because I think to me, it's portals are a very tough subject to talk about in a way.
hmm hmm I had one brief experience that I felt was a portal when I was very young. So I can't really give it a lot of credibility because I was young, so I don't know what I was really seeing. And you know how memories are, they can go in all different directions as you're trying to remember things from when you were a kid. But um I'm kind of on the fence about portals. I do think that there is some sort of a string theory thing going on. So that portal may just be where things cross over for that quick second,
Hmm.
you know, and
The
things are
big
able
booms
to
that are
to
supposed to go with it.
manifest. So, yeah, I mean, the big boom is beyond my recognition and thinking. Like, I'm not there for science, but if that's what happened, then that's what happened. But I've never, as an adult, seen a portal. I mean, I've never seen a poltergeist type of closet where you can throw the tennis balls through it or something. Um,
Your meat
but
across the kitchen counter.
I imagine that some of the entities that we call paranormal are coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
So if they're not spirits that are just still lingering on our side, then maybe there is some sort of portals that open quickly, or maybe we just can't even see them.
Yeah.
Um, I
And
don't
who
know
knows
many
what they
people who have
are?
seen one, but
Yeah. And who knows
I
what
know.
they are, right? As like we give everything labels. I say that all the time.
Mhm.
Like, we label everything. So how
We
do we
do.
know what really, what anything really is? Like so
Yep.
it could be all the same thing, but it's how certain people portray it. You may see Bigfoot, I see a ghost. Darren might
Mhm.
see, you know, I don't know, a crawler or something,
Mhm.
but we all see it differently. Like I said, I
Right.
think interpretation has a lot to do with it,
Yeah.
to be
So
I
honest.
do think that. Yeah.
I feel Bigfoot's another form of an alien because he's said to be so lightning quick, but yet I hear so much of alien uh that is introduced with Bigfoot a lot, you know.
Mhm.
It's all starting to come under the same umbrella. I mean, it used to be divided, but now everybody's just kind of putting it all under one umbrella. Everything,
Yeah. Yep.
everything's
So it's just
paranormal.
I hope we get some answers during my lifetime, but I don't know if we'll ever know, because we're so dumb as a species right now. I mean, we don't really know a lot about a lot. I mean, our own bodies, we don't know everything about them. We know very little about our own brains and how they work.
Right?
We don't even know why we're here when we've got all this intelligence and every other animal and species on this planet has so much less than us, you know. So who knows? I mean, there's evidence of there have been higher intelligent beings than us one time on this planet and they're not here anymore. So it's so hard to just answer any of those types of questions that are out there.
Right. Right.
So let's. And forgive me if we talked about this, but if you guys talked about it, but um, what was your, moment where, because you had mentioned that you experienced stuff when you were younger, but you kind of just brushed it off. Like, what was that experience where you're like, holy shit? And then, you know, and and then, like, did you have anybody to go to with that stuff, and were they understanding? And then, if not, how do they feel about what you do now?
Yeah, I mean, I never ever talked to I never talked to my mother about anything paranormal until I was well into my adulthood, and found out that she believed in a lot of it just like me, and we had never talked about it. We actually ended up talking about a few things that I had remembered as an adult that happened to me when I was a child, and she confirmed some things and couldn't remember other things. Um, some of my earliest memories of stuff happening that's paranormal was when I was probably a teenager, 14, 15 years old. I used to spend a lot of time at a place called Swan Point Cemetery, which is located in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a huge cemetery. It's very old, but also still modern because they're still using it to bury people to this day. But you can find gravestones as far back as the late 1600s there.
Oh, I love that.
It's the burial place of H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, cool.
It's got all kinds of legends and lore. There are a lot of witches' circles in the woods behind it where people practice witchcraft, be it good or bad. And when I was younger, there were a lot of different places you could go to and check out and explore. Some of them aren't there anymore because of things that happened, but I actually spend, I think it's a 2 or 3 part episode on my podcast about Swan Point because I had so many experiences there growing up, because I literally would go there almost every day on my bike just to check things out, to see things, to learn things. I was never really afraid. I wanted to know what it was. I was very, very curious as a kid. I was very much a Goonie. I was the one who wanted to go in a tunnel. I wanted to check out everything. The haunted house, let's go. Let's get in,
Yeah.
And Swan Point Cemetery, Swan Point just has so much history to it. I would love to just like write a book about it someday. Because it was just the legend of the cemetery is that it was built on the same ground that was once a witch's village. The story basically was during the times of the Salem trials, a lot of the witches in the Salem area escaped down to Rhode Island because Rhode Island had freedom of religion. Witchcraft was acceptable in Rhode Island. It was the only, colony that was you could do it. And they settled on the river there in Providence, the Blackstone River, and started their own village. And the story goes that one night, some men from Salem, Massachusetts, came down on their boats and slaughtered all the witches and their families and burnt the village to the ground.
Wow.
Now, I don't have anything to document that to prove it. It's just legend. But there are many people who practice witchcraft to this day who believe in that story, and they go out into those woods because they consider it hollowed ground.
Right.
So they go out there and they have built witches circles and they do seances and witchcraft and all those things that they do. And when I was younger, I used to go out into those woods and I would stumble across these circles and I would look at some of the things they'd been doing. I'd see, broken flasks inside of a small fire pit, and I would see staffs that were carved in different types of artifacts and things that I would find. And I even got chased out of the woods once by a couple of guys in cloaks who weren't happy that I was there. So, I had a friend when I was a kid whose much older brother was, he was a witch. He was a male witch, a warlock, and he knew a lot about the history there. So I learned a lot about it. So the fact that it's buried on such a hollow ground like that, the cemetery is built on such a hollow ground, that makes it very, very interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and also with the continuation of witchcraft, you know what I mean? That's got to kind of add a little bit of I always call them error cues, when you just kind of like, you're doing something to, even though that might not be their intention, you know what I mean? Which is a big part, but like you're doing something to kind of keep that alive, you know what I mean? The spirit alive there,
Yeah. There was lots of magical stuff happening there. There is one tomb there, which is called the Sprague tomb. and it's named for the Sprague family. Amasa Sprague was the senior here. He had the tomb built for his family. And the Sprague family was very famous in Rhode Island. They were a family of politicians. A couple of them were governors. Some of them were, I think, Congress people, things like that. They were very involved with things like the wars, Civil War, and things like that. And a couple of them were into, dark magic. And so when he had the tomb built, he had it built. The inside of the tomb, he's buried at the top, which would be like the altar of a church. And then the rest of the family were buried where the pews would be of a church.
Oh,
And while I never got to go in the tomb, I did get to see pictures of it because the Sprague Mansion, which is also in Rhode Island and considered haunted, when I got to investigate there, the caretaker at the time, I told him the story about the cemetery and how I used to go there as a kid, and I told him the legend of the tomb, and he said he'd been in there and he had pictures of it, and he showed me. They had to actually cement the door shut though because people kept trying to break in. And so the family eventually sealed it up. You can't go in anymore to pay respects.
That sucks.
But the big part of it was on top of the tomb, because it was kind of built into the side of a hill. If you go around to the top of the hill, Amasa Sprague had created this strange circular structure, I guess you call it, out of trees and bushes on the top. He had this designed himself. It was these huge, I don't know what kind of trees and bushes they were, but the outer layer of bushes were probably like 8 to 10 feet tall. And then coming out of the middle of those was 5 large trees, and the branches would overlap the bushes, and it was kind of like a cave inside. Wow. And there was 2 ways to get in. The way the bushes were positioned, there was a way to get in from like this side and a way to get in from the other side. And when you went inside, those tree trunks were it was basically positioned to be a 5-pointed star, a pentagram.
Oh, wow.
And in the ground, there would be lots and lots of people doing witchcraft in there. So people took ash and basically burned the lines into the ground of the pentagram between the 3 tree trunks, and the tree trunks had carvings in them, and most of the bark was gone. And it was very full of energy. When I would go in there as a kid, it could be 50 degrees out, it could be 100 degrees out. You go in there and it was always cold. You could almost see your breath. It was always that cold in this bush. I had a friend who's very, very well-trained and loyal dog who would go everywhere with him, but would not go inside those bushes with him, would only run around the outside, was afraid to go in. And you just felt it. When you went in there, you just felt like something was going on in there. You could feel the energy. It was just, the air was different. Everything just felt heavier and thicker. And a lot of people did lots of witchcraft in there. So because things kept getting out of hand, people were trespassing, going in there in the middle of the night. And obviously the cemetery didn't want that. So they got permission at one time to cut one of the trees down. The thinking was, if we get rid of one of the trees, that disrupts the pentagram and maybe that'll stop them from going in there. But from what I understand, what ended up happening was the little stump that was left over, they would just have someone from their witch group, their coven, whatever you want to call it, go into a trance, a meditative trance, standing on that stump, and they would be the 5th missing point for the pentagram, and they could still do their rituals and such.
Oh, wow.
So it eventually got to a point where it just got out of hand. I remember one night, it was Halloween, and I would always drive by there, when I was older. I would always drive by there on Halloween, and I'd always drive by in April, the 2 witches' holidays, first day of spring and Halloween, and just to see if there's any activity going on. I wouldn't go into the cemetery. I'd just drive by and see if there's anything going on. And one year at Halloween, I drove by and there was police cars everywhere. And apparently what had happened was, I guess some witchcraft group had got caught in there doing stuff. To this point, the cemetery had to get security. They had security guards on duty at all times. They had security dogs to chase people out of there when they would see them there in the night. And I guess the people got mad, and one night they snuck into the cemetery on Halloween. They snuck in and they killed the guard dogs. They killed the security dogs. They in gruesome ways, they massacred the dogs, which very much upsets me. And that was the last straw for the cemetery. They said to the
I
family,
cannot believe that.
we're taking the whole thing away. So the entire structure of bushes and trees and everything was just completely removed with backhoes. There's no stumps. There's
I
no
don't blame
nothing.
them. No, I don't blame them.
It's just an empty plain of grass there now. And it's so weird because when I go there, I can still picture it being there, but you would never know if you walked by it now. But that was the last straw for them, and I don't blame them. I don't blame
Me
them.
neither.
But what an amazing
Hey, me.
place. I have so many other stories from that cemetery that I've told on the podcast, and I've told a million times. I've given people tours. I have friends who are buried in there, and so that was probably where my very first paranormal experiences began to happen.
Wow.
Do you still do things with Andy on the side or no?
Andy who?
I believe it wasn't when you're you went in the woods at one time and you got stuck in those places. That was like
Andy, yeah. Andy is the name I use on the podcast because I didn't want to use his real name.
Oh, that's fine.
why
We
I'm
can
like,
stick with
who's
that,
Andy?
though.
That's one of the things sometimes people ask me about my stories. I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about because I don't like to use people's real names because I didn't ask them if they wanted to be part of my ghost story, because some of them may not want people to know that they had experiences. So, no, I haven't talked to him in quite a few years. We were childhood friends. And then once we got older, we kind of just went our own ways, once we were in our 17, 18-year-old ages. I think last I heard he was living out in the Midwest somewhere. He reached out to me like 10 years ago, maybe, because my father had passed away and it was my father's apartment that I used to go stay at. And that's where I got to be friends with him as a kid. And we used to do see all kinds of things out in the woods and stuff. So I haven't done anything with him.
Do you I forgot what I was going to ask you because I thought about another question. Do you have a favorite story that you've told?
I have a few. The story that I used to tell the most, which is what inspired me to even do the podcast, because I was like, I'm always telling this story. I should get it on record somewhere. And that was when I lived in a haunted house on Cemetery Street, of all places. First red flag, right? And I'll tell you the story. Obviously, it's on the podcast, but I'll go into it a little bit greater detail on the podcast. But I had a friend who lived in this house in Providence, Rhode Island, right across the street from a cemetery, which I don't think had anything to do with the hauntings, but it sounds spookier because it's on Cemetery Street. But my friend was living in this house. He had 3 roommates, and I would come over and visit. And 2 of the roommates were girls, and they used to always talk about the ghosts that they would see upstairs in their bedrooms and stuff. And, they were young girls in their 20s, so we would, just laugh at them and whatever, be guys. And then one of them ended up moving out. And just around that time, I needed a place to live. I was moving. So I ended up taking one of the bedrooms upstairs. And lo and behold, I started having weird things start to happen to me. And so they all started off, like most hauntings, started off slow and just kind of things that are just weird. Little things would happen, like I would come home from work, go into my bedroom, and things would be out of place. They'd be moved. And I'd, be asking my roommates who was in my room, who's touching my stuff, and none of them did. It was little things like I had a couple of autographed baseballs that I kept in protective cubes, squares, on the back of one of my bureaus. And more than once, I came home from work and those were moved to the front edge of the bureau. So they're in cubes, they're not rolling, and nobody moved them. None of my roommates claimed to have moved them. So that was weird. A couple times I would come home and find drawers pulled open. My closet door swung open, and I'm kind of an OCD person, so I always close things behind me, doors, drawers, whatever. One morning, I went to go take a shower before work. I come back in my room. Every drawer in my bureau has been pulled open. The closet's wide open. I definitely didn't do that. It wasn't like that before my shower. So I just started thinking, is something going on here, or is someone pranking me? You know what I mean? Like you don't want to jump to the paranormal right away.
Right.
And this is before I'd ever been an investigator or seen ghost hunters or anything like that. So things began to escalate a little bit more. there was a morning where my alarm didn't go off for work. Now, I had an electric alarm clock, and it had a battery in it as a battery backup, and I was always paranoid about being late for work, so I used to have my cell phone alarm on as well, and none of them went off. None of them worked. But all 3 of my roommates, none of their alarm clocks worked either. All 4 of us were late for work that morning.
Wow.
We hadn't lost power. Like I said, I had battery backup. A couple of us were using our cell phones. None of us were able to make it to work on time that day because for some reason nobody's alarms worked in the house. So it was weird.
That is weird.
Yep.
I've had that similar situation happen to me a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll mess with you. They'll get you fired if you're not careful. So more and more things started to happen. I started having really, really bad dreams, just real night terrors. I would have dreams of dying or close people to me dying. There was one time I woke up, I dreamt that I was at my own funeral, and I woke up like with my arms across my chest like this, like I was in a coffin.
Yeah.
Oh,
My girlfriend at the time, she would wake up in the middle of the night, tell me that she saw a black shadow in the corner and that she felt like somebody was watching us while we're sleeping. And she would have weird dreams too. So the night that I figured that this is haunted, it was probably 2, 3 in the morning. I'm a late person. And I was just
because all that other stuff you weren't convinced
that other
yet.
stuff I wasn't convinced yet. I just wasn't. Because it was more or less happening without me being there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I was on my computer one night in my bedroom, 2, 3 in the morning. It was late. I'm playing some video game. And to my right, I had a floor mirror. It's like one of those oval mirrors that's on 2 legs and you can kind of pivot it and stuff. I had one of those. I think they call it a shovel mirror or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one of those just to the right of my desk, like I could reach it. And as I'm sitting at my computer doing whatever I'm doing, I can see the mirror just kind of slowly moving like this to the point where it's just almost horizontal, just right in front of me. I'm just sitting there watching it do that. It wasn't moving like it was loose. It was as if somebody was slowly pushing it horizontal.
Yeah.
And I sat there looking at it, thinking to myself, I've seen enough haunted movies. When I put this thing back up, I'm going to see something in it standing behind me,
Right.
But I was like, but I got to do it. It's what you got to do. So I slowly,
that part.
yeah, see, that's how I am. I'm always the one who wants to go in, wants to be curious. So I slowly put it back into place, could feel that it was still pretty tight. It wasn't loose bolts. And when I put it back upright, there was nothing there, which I was relieved, but still couldn't explain why the mirror moved. So at that point I was like, I think something's messing with me in this house,
I'd say.
So it escalated more. A few nights later, I'm laying in bed and I feel like something got onto my bed. Now, my roommate, the only girl who was still a roommate, she had moved from upstairs to the basement. She made herself a bedroom in the basement. That's how scared she was of the upstairs bedrooms. She would rather live in the basement.
Yeah, because most people are afraid of the basement.
Exactly.
Like that's the last place I'd want to be.
Exactly.
I'd like
Now
to see the basement.
she used to have the bedroom that I was in now.
Was it a finished basement?
No, it was not. No,
Oh,
she
no, so I couldn't do
basically
it.
turned it into one. She put in a rug and some stuff on the walls in the bed. And so my bedroom used to be her bedroom. And she used to tell me the stories of seeing an old man in there and stuff and would happen. But she had a cat, and her cat, still thought it was her bedroom. So a lot of times during the night, the cat would come in my room to jump on the bed and sleep next to me, which I was fine with. Love animals,
Yeah.
So when I felt something get on my bed, I thought it was just the cat, so it woke me, but it didn't disturb me, But as I was laying there, I felt what it was move up the bed and sit on top of me. It felt like somebody was straddling me and sitting almost on my chest. And when I opened my eyes, I saw what looked like an old man looking down at me, wearing like an old-fashioned black hat, and he was just old and just wrinkly looking. And he started swinging at me like he was trying to hit me, slap me, or punch me.
Wow.
So obviously I went into a panic. I'm trying to block it. I jump out of the bed, turn on the lights, and no one's there. The old man's not there. There's no cat there. There's nothing there. It's just me. And when I told my roommate about it, the one who used to be in that room, I described what the old man looked like. She's like, "Yep, that's exactly the guy that used to wake me up." She goes, "I would open my eyes and his face would be right in mine like this." She goes, "And he's angry." She goes, "That's all I know is he's angry." So that's when I was like, wow, there's some stuff going on here. So that's when I really was like, I want to learn more.
Okay.
Time to go, right?
Yeah. I'm out.
Yeah. No, it made me want to learn more. I started reading. I started watching, documentaries.
I would have too, but I just wouldn't have been there doing it.
I started learning about
smudging
and sage and dragon's breath and all these different things.
Right.
So one night, I'll finish with this because this is kind of the closer.
Oh, no.
I come home from work one night, and my roommate, the original male roommate who I was friends with, who was the one who invited me to move into the house, he was not a believer in any of this stuff. He was like a guy's guy, He's like, you're just being silly, you're as bad as the girls and whatever, But I come home one night. Well, actually, I had told him about the story of what happened when the guy got on top of me and tried hitting me. I told him that one night. And all of a sudden, he wasn't the guy's guy anymore. He looked me straight in the face and he goes, "You know what? Years ago, when I was living here and that was my bedroom, the same exact thing happened to me." And he was like, "I thought I was drunk." He goes, "I thought I just imagined it." He goes, "But you literally just explained the same exact thing that happened to me. I thought somebody was trying to beat me up while I was laying in bed."
Wow.
So for him to have admitted that was like huge, So one night I come home from work and that roommate is sitting in the living room and there's some guy in the house sitting there with him. I don't know who this guy was, but he introduces me to him. He's like, "Oh, this is so-and-so, so-and-so. This is Tom." And he goes, "Tom's in your old bedroom." And this guy must have lived there at one time and is friends with him. And he shakes my hand and he pulls me in and he goes, "Have you seen the old man yet?" Just like that. I mean, I just met the guy and he's already asking me about the old man in that bedroom. So very haunted house. That was what really made me want to learn more.
Did you ever find out about the guy? Did you ever get any? Could you ever?
Not enough to really say. I did some research and I saw a couple of stories on the internet where people said that there was a guy long time ago who owned all that land and the city wanted to take it so that they could build it up into commerce. They wanted to put stores and more residential and stuff, and he just owned it like an empty piece of land and he didn't want to sell it. So they ended up taking it by eminent domain. They basically just stole it from him.
I wonder if he thinks like people coming in there are people that are coming to take his land.
That's what I think. I think he sees us as intruders, trespassers on his property, and he's trying to scare us away. That's what I came to.
Yeah.
When all four of us eventually moved out, and we didn't just like rush out of there or anything, we just all kind of moved on. I sent a letter to the house, just to current resident, just wrote him out, typed out a letter and said, "Hey, I used to live there. This sounds strange, but things used to happen to me there of a paranormal nature. And in my years since living there, I've become a paranormal investigator and researcher. And I want to offer these services to you at no charge. I would really love to know more about that house. And if you're having any experiences, please let me know. I'd be happy to help you and learn more about it and help you get through it." And then I gave them my email address and stuff. And like a week or two later, they sent me an email, but basically just said, "Oh, nothing's happened here. Like we believe in that kind of stuff, but we haven't had anything happen here and we'll let you know if we do." And then I never heard from them. So that was all I ended up getting out of it. But it's what led me to be wanting to be a paranormal investigator. With all my knowledge and experience, I started seeing shows like Ghost Hunters and Paranormal State. And I was like, oh, there are other people out there who are having haunted situations. And there are people with knowledge and experience that are going and helping them. I want to do that. I want to make this a positive. So, I grew up in Rhode Island. That's where TAPS is from. That's the original Ghost Hunters. So I reached out to different paranormal teams and I ended up meeting with one called Rise Up Paranormal. They're still around today. They're still my good friends. And I ended up joining their team. And from there, we went on to so many investigations and did so many things. And that was the story. The house on Cemetery Street was the house that really brought me to this level of paranormal awareness and really sparked my interest.
Are most of your stories on your podcast from that time of being in this house or?
No.
There's lots of different ones.
Yeah, I mean, I have stories that bounce all around from different times of my life. I have some from when I was a little kid. I have some that happened a year ago. Some of them are about investigations. A lot of them are my personal experiences. The house on Cemetery Street, I think, might be 2 parts. I'm not sure. I can't remember now if that one's a 2-parter. I think Swan Point Cemetery is a 2 or 3-parter because there was just so many stories. I broke it up.
Nightclub is 2-parter, and that's the
Yep,
one that she doesn't know about.
The station nightclub fire is a 2-parter one. Because I was a survivor of the fire and some paranormal situations. One of them probably saved my life, and then some others that happened after the fire.
Wow.
So that one's always a big one right around February when it's the anniversary of the fire.
Yeah.
The one I was listening to today was where you're with a former girlfriend, and you went into his house helping them move out the old grandfather that passed away, and about the basement with you saw a cat paw underneath there.
Yep. That one's an older one. Yeah,
that was good. I like that one.
Sorry, you had to go through a fire. That had to be very scary. I can't imagine.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I was just thinking about when we had a outside garage was on fire one night, and it was a pretty big garage. It was almost as big as a house. That's how big the garage was. And when I looked out my window, the whole thing was engulfed in flames. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
And it was starting to melt my stepdad's truck that was in the yard too. So it was getting close to our house, but luckily we were able to get the fire department there before it got to the house. But just that was scary. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, fire spreads so fast. It's so scary. And I mean, I was super lucky with the nightclub fire. I was in the club with 4 friends. Somehow all 5 of us got out without any injury, little couple bumps here and there. That was it. But I mean, I'll tell you what basically happened. I'm watching the show start, and they shoot off some spark cannons, which I've been to hundreds of rock shows, and a lot of them use that. Those things aren't really hot. You could put your hand in there and not burn it. But because of the foam that was on the walls was highly flammable, these sparks were enough to start the fire.
Wait a second. Was this a really big news story too?
Great White one.
Yeah, it's the Great White fire from 20-something years ago.
A lot of people passed.
100 exactly.
Wow. Yep. Yes, I think I do remember this. Wow.
It's like the 3rd or 4th largest fire tragedy in the history of the country.
I remember that.
And so when the fire started, my first instinct was, well, somebody, it didn't look like a big deal. Somebody's going to come put this out with a fire extinguisher or something. But before you know it, it's starting to be smoky everywhere. The fire's starting to grow, and people are panicking and they're running everywhere. And I'm like, I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
So my first instinct was to run towards the front door, which is the way I came in because it was my first time in the building. That's your instinct. Go the way you came in. I don't know where the other doors are. And as I no sooner took a step or two, and I heard a voice behind me say, "No, Tom, this way." And when I turned around, I saw a side door open, and a few people had been going out of it. So I got out that way. And if I had gone to the front door, that's where everybody got stuck, and most of the casualties were, because there was enough room for maybe 2 people at a time to get out, and there was like hundreds trying. So they literally stampeded and all fell on top of each other and got stuck. Oh. And I would have been in that pile had I not heard that voice. Now, all my friends, none of them were the voice. One of my friends was ahead of me, and he turned around because of me. And my other friends had already gotten out, and one of them was a girl, and this was a male voice. And the other friends said, "No, I didn't say it." So I don't know who said it. So most people chalk it up to being, guardian angel or some sort of a spirit attachment or something. But somebody's voice screamed out my name and said, "No, Tom, this way." They didn't even scream it. It was very calm, which also makes me think it wasn't somebody there.
Yeah,
because they would have been in a panic. It was very calm. "No, Tom, this way." And I turned around and I got out that way. And then once I found my friends, I went back to the door and tried to help get people out of there as much as I could. And, I always chalked that up to being some sort of a paranormal thing because it kind of was.
Yeah. I mean, if you could sense calmness in such a frantic and chaotic moment, You know what I mean? Like you sense the chaos. Like most people that are in that situation wouldn't be able to, you know what I mean? Like nobody would be able to differentiate that
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you're so concerned
Yeah.
with what's happening, you know?
It was such a frenzy that if it had been somebody standing next to me, they would have been as panicked as I am, you
And
know?
and you wouldn't have thought about it. You wouldn't have thought about it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this, you're like, it was very calm voice. Like
Mhm.
something made you feel that calmness, even if in for a
Yep.
second, enough to
Yep.
think and listen, you know?
Yep. Not to mention at this point, it was dark because the lights had gone off
Yeah.
and there's like loud smoke alarms going off, and it was just a tidal wave of really dark, black, sooty smoke going through the place. It was almost thick enough to knock you over. It was so thick.
Wow.
So it's like, even if it had been somebody there, I don't even know if they would have seen me or recognized me at that point because it was just
Right.
so hard to see.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been from like the light outside the door, I wouldn't even have found the door, you know?
Right.
Right. And then when you
So,
went back to help people come out and had another person that came up next to you, you didn't realize it was actually one of your
yep.
friends that was helping you.
Yeah. One of the friends that was with me when I went outside, there was one friend I couldn't find, but my other friends were like, "No, he got out. We saw him. We know he's okay." And I'm like, "All right." And I ran back to that side door I got out of, got on my hands and knees and just started banging on the floor because I'm figuring people can't see. Maybe they'll come to the sound.
Wow.
And there was another guy next to me in the door doing the same thing. It turned out to be my friend. We both instinctively went right back
I
to do the same
know. You
thing.
guys are
And
heroes.
we were able to reach in and grab a few people. Who knows how many? Just a couple
That's
probably. But,
awesome. Thank
you
you.
know,
Thank you so much.
it was, yeah, so scary situation, but I also, it was another one of those stories I wanted to get documented because, after time you start forgetting different
Yeah,
aspects, or
absolutely.
your brain starts saying, one thing happened that didn't or something. So I kind of used the podcast to kind of document that story, and there were some, weird things that happened days after as well.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a traumatic experience, though, and it's good that you are kind of, doing some positive stuff to, I'm sure that doing the paranormal stuff kind of helps cope with that a little bit, um, or get past it a little bit.
Um,
I don't know about get
Yeah,
past.
I guess it helps to tell the story, and so, I've told the story a million times in different places and different, mediums and stuff, but, I did a lot obviously after that. I did a lot of fundraising and helped lots of people, and,
Yeah. So you did.
strangely, a lot of people who weren't there and people who weren't even, like, related to anybody who died there needed therapy too. Like, everybody in the state needed therapy after
Yeah.
that fire
Yeah.
because like, even to this day, people say, "Oh, I was supposed to go that night," or, "Oh, my uncle was supposed to be there." And it's like, if everybody who was supposed to be there had been there, there'd have been 6,000 people there, and they never would have fit.
Right. Right.
Right. Right.
So it's just one of those things where I feel like, I was able to help people that night, and I've been able to help people over the
That's
years,
awesome.
either sharing my story or listening to their story. And obviously, I used to work in radio and television, so I did a lot of fundraising and things like that. I was really close with a main charity that helped out the families of the victims and stuff. And I had a few friends who were there that night that got hurt too. That I did my best to help along the
No,
way.
that's awesome.
Mm.
That's awesome, and that's what I was trying to say. Like you're turning this into a positive. First of all,
Mhm.
the good side of it. Yes, obviously you want to be present and be aware. With the fundraising and all that stuff, which is the positive side of it. But also doing the paranormal stuff, it takes you away from thinking about the bad stuff because you're helping people as a paranormal investigator. You're helping people
Mhm.
with this kind of stuff. So for me, paranormal stuff is a positive outlet for people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it
And
definitely can be.
capacity.
Definitely
Yep.
here. That's for
Yep.
sure.
I mean, since after I became a paranormal investigator, I was able to help so many people with so many different situations in their homes. Some of them maybe not even paranormal, but we were able to help them just
Yeah,
the same. Uh,
absolutely.
so yeah, paranormal should be a positive thing. It should be about trying to help people or about trying to move the science of it forward. That's
Yeah,
what I've always believed. Some
yeah,
people do it just for the thrill. A lot of people do it for the thrill. Some people are doing it for the fame.
a
That's fine.
lot.
Do what you want. But for me, I've always wanted to either help people or just try to push things along,
Yeah,
as far as the field of research.
yeah.
Right. Right.
Amy had a question. Sorry, Amy. But we're gonna get to it right now. When you were talking about night terrors and stuff like
Oh
that,
yeah.
she wants to know, do you think night terrors are hauntings?
I think so. I think yeah, I think night terrors are a sign of a haunting. Whenever I hear people say that, all of a sudden out of the blue I'm having all these weird dreams and they're very dark, and because I don't feel like our dreams are usually dark. They're usually just, vivid, just weird situations. But when they're really dark and about death and stuff, I feel like it's a spirit maybe trying to communicate, or some sort of an energy trying to reach out to you in a way. I've had dreams that have predicted things that ended up coming true days or weeks later.
Hmm.
So
What about
I definitely, I,
astral
That's happened to me a
projections?
couple of times.
yeah. So I do think that there's more for us to learn about dreams, and obviously, many different cultures and people have thought dreams were spiritual in ways. So yeah, I definitely think so.
I and astral projection dreams, those are, oh man, like I said, talk about vivid. Those are
Hmm.
wicked.
I would
Hmm.
love to be able to. I say this all the time. I don't know the difference between astral projection or what's the other one where they travel at night or something, or
That's the same thing, basically.
astral projection. Is that what that is?
Yeah. Yeah, you
Um,
can do that both, during the day or at night. It just all depends when some are doing it when they're awake.
but I always say I would do it like to go to like Brad Pitt's house.
Yeah, do it someplace nice. Yeah, if you're gonna leave your body to go somewhere, go
Yeah,
somewhere
I go
fun.
like Brad Pitt's house, right? Go to like,
Mhm.
Animal Kingdom and Disney World. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I would go to cool places.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
what you're talking about is, destination. What is that movie called? With premonitions, in a way.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, that's what I think some dreams are premonitions. I feel like dreams are premonitions. I feel like dreams can be motivational. I think they can be messages in some way. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's hard to pay attention to your dreams because you forget them so quickly. But I feel like the ones that stick with you that you don't forget, those are important ones. I've always believed that dreams are a message, and it's almost like a code you have to break. You have to kind of figure out what the message is.
Hmm.
hmm
I had a weird one last night. I was backstage at some show. I don't know if it was like a concert or something, but there were lots of people around, and for some reason, I ended up sitting next to Taylor Swift, and I was just having this long, very cool, very down to earth conversation with Taylor Swift. She wanted to know more about me and what I do, and then next thing I know, some guy comes in the room, and I feel like it was her manager or her father or something, and he demanded that everybody had to get COVID tests if they wanted to stay in the room. And next thing I know, I'm going into the other room to take a COVID test, and that was when I woke up. I have no idea what this dream
Wow.
means,
Okay.
but it stuck with me. It's vivid. So now all day long I've been like trying to decipher what it means. Like
That's funny.
I know it has nothing to do with Taylor Swift, or hopefully nothing to do with COVID, but who knows? There's probably a message there of some kind. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Dreams
I
are
have the
crazy.
reoccurring dreams a lot, and just they go in, like, the ending is in so many different directions. Like, it plays over and over, but then the ending's different. You know,
mhm.
uh, I have a lot of stuff like that.
I've
Yeah, I've
had one visit dream.
had
One.
a visit dream. Yeah.
Yeah, one. In my entire with everybody. Like I've lost a lot of
Oh,
people.
okay. Yep.
But my father, I had one 2005. I remember it like it
Oh,
was
so
yesterday.
your father came to you in your dream?
Yeah,
Well, now was this how long after he had passed was that?
5 years.
5 years? Okay.
Yeah,
See, I believe that's possible, and then that's a message as well. I mean, I
yeah,
believe those signs happen when we're awake too, that you see something that reminds you of somebody who's passed, and,
yeah, yeah,
you know, I think that's on purpose. I think that happens on purpose.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
But
So
with dreams, there are things called crisis apparitions where you will dream of somebody just as they're dying,
right.
and that's happened to me a couple times. And I've heard lots of stories about this where people are like, "Oh, I had a dream about my grandmother. We were hanging out together. We were making a pie or something." And then they wake up the next morning and find out that their grandmother passed away during the night. And it's like, she came to visit you one last time. you know?
Yeah, it's crazy because like the day that my dad passed that night, I have 6 brothers. So I was the oldest. The youngest had a dream about him.
Oh, no.
And my other brother, his girlfriend was like, he was like reaching up into the corner, and he said there's a black balloon in the corner, like that's how he described it, and he's like, I think it's my dad. And my brother said that he had a dream when he woke up, but in the dream, because he called me, he goes, what does a vigil mean? And I'm like, what? He's like, what's a vigil? Because they were younger than me. And I said,
Yeah.
well, it's where people gather around somewhere and like they light candles, and they usually it's like it's in a memory thing of somebody. Why?
Mhm.
And he's like, well, I had a dream about dad last night, and he said that he'll come. He's like, don't worry, I'll see you again. I'll be at my vigil.
Oh, wow.
When he woke up, he saw this black balloon. So all my brothers, I had something happen. My boyfriend at the time, my dad had just started to like him. So for the longest time, he was scumbag. But my dad just started to like him. And that night I stayed at his house with his mom. His dad was there and everything, and he had his arm up on my shoulder, like just consoling me. And I felt it, but I didn't see it. He saw it, and this was prior to paranormal anything for me. But his hand literally like lifted up off my shoulder and went on the bed,
Oh, wow.
and I could feel the way it didn't slip. It was
Yep.
like you could tell, and he was a big dude, and
Mhm.
he was like, he couldn't. He was like cursing. He was like, "What the?" Blah, blah, blah. I was like, that was probably my dad saying, "Hands off the merchandise."
Yeah.
Like,
Yep. Yep.
so,
Hands off my girl.
yeah. But the visit
Yeah.
dream was amazing.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing when that happens.
Yeah.
And I think when the dreams are recurring, I feel like that's the premonition. My dreams that were premonitions were always dreams that I had more than once, sometimes, in a few nights in a row. And I would try to decipher what they mean. And I haven't had anything like that happen in a long time. I'm hoping the ability is still there. Maybe I just haven't needed to know anything in a while. I don't know. But
Yeah.
dreams are, I think, to answer that question, I think they're definitely something paranormal going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, this has been a great conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he said to me before, he goes, "You're gonna like this guy." And you're right.
This is my world. I love talking about this stuff and
me too.
educating people on it and hearing people's stories. I love it.
Yeah. I usually have a question like, what was your top 5 locations you'd like to go to yet? But
Mhm.
I've recently changed that up because I feel it's being overused a lot in other shows and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
the one I come up with is, if you had 2 weeks at a location, one
Mhm.
location for 2 weeks, what would it be and why?
Um, hmm. It's a tough one. There's so many places I would love to spend 2 weeks in. Um, obviously, I think Skinwalker Ranch is a really interesting place. Would love to be able to spend 2 weeks there maybe. I think if I was to name a place, it would be, the La Laurie House in, New Orleans, which has been famously haunted, but no one's really been able to investigate properly. It's a house that was, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but um, way back in the day, it had, they had slaves working there, and I guess the doctor who lived in the house used to do experiments, like really horrifying experiments on the slaves up in the attic, where
Oh,
he would literally like, take body parts from one person and try and sew them onto another and see if they
Oh
could
Jesus.
goodness.
function. A lot of it had to do with sexual things, and it was just pure torture what was happening to these people, because this was like probably 1800s, maybe even 1700s. So this was before things like anesthesia and and all the
Some
modern
kind
things
of
that we
human
have now.
centipede.
So the TV show American Horror Story did a season that was loosely based on it, and Nicolas Cage actually once bought the house.
Oh yeah.
The The actor is famous for buying haunted mansions and places
Really?
Yep, and just he loves collecting macabre type things.
I think he
And
went last 3 days
Wait a
in there.
second. Nicolas
Yeah.
Cage buys up haunted location. He just got
Yeah.
so much cooler.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Look it up. He's owned a lot of weird ones. He'll buy it. He'll own it for a short time. He'll spend a week or two in it for his own thrill, I guess, and then he usually sells it off to try and make profit. And he actually bought a mansion in my home state of Rhode Island and had it for a short time. But he actually had owned the Lalaurie house and knew about the hauntings and everything. And, it was always traditional for him to live there for a week or two with his family. And I guess after the first night or two, the story goes, he sent his family home. He didn't want them to be there anymore because I guess stuff was going down.
Houses and moves his family in and stuff, and they hang
Yeah.
out in the
Yeah.
house.
They'll stay there for a week or two, like a vacation.
I'm going to email him and ask him to come on my show.
So he sent them out. And then I guess he only lasted 4 or 5 days, and then he got out of there and immediately sold the place. Usually he hangs on to these places for a while, and he immediately sold it, probably not even for a profit. Might have even lost money. So it's just always been a really interesting historic place to me where tragic things happen. I mean, stories are that people hear screaming come from the house still. They see people in the windows.
Owned it?
What's that?
Did you say Nicolas Cage owned this one? Or he
owned this one, yeah. He owned the Lalaurie house in New Orleans, yeah.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Like I said, he sold it right away because apparently it was too scary. He's never spoken about it.
No buyer's remorse?
Yeah, it must have been, yeah. So, I think it would be awesome to be able to investigate there. And then there was the story of, and this is a true story, this is the place that I always wanted to investigate, and I never got to, and no one ever will. Some years ago, I went on to the website Reddit. A lot of people know about Reddit now, but back in the day, Reddit wasn't very well known. Just mostly your computer nerds knew about Reddit. And they used to do a thing called Ask Me Anything. It was called AMA.
I think I've heard of that, yeah.
The premise of it at the beginning was you would go on there as an expert in whatever it is you're good at. So you'd say, oh, I've been a police officer for 7 years. Ask me anything. And then people would ask questions and, list questions, and then you'd go in and you'd answer them. They become threads, and so somebody be a lawyer or a doctor or, weird things. I worked at a graveyard for 6 years. Ask me anything, whatever. So I went on there and said, oh, I think I'll do an AMA as a paranormal investigator and let people ask me questions. Well, for 3 days, the thing absolutely blew up. Just thousands of questions I got. Some of them were trolls. Some of them were people just trying to, joke around, make fun of me, piss me off, whatever. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them serious questions or just curious questions. And I would take the time to answer every single question, no matter who it was or what their intention was. And I would just try to give them my best answer based on my experiences and education on topics and stuff. And this went on for days and days and days. And then finally, somebody reached out to me, asked me for my email address. I gave it to him. And he turned out to be a documentary producer from Hollywood. And he said, I've been watching your AMA on Reddit. He goes, I like how you handled everybody, all the questions and all the people. He goes, even the ones that were trying to bully you or upset you. He's like, you were always professional with all of them. He goes, I asked a bunch of questions and you were very thoughtful with your answers. He goes, I think I want to make you a consultant for something I'm going to work on. And I said, oh, well, I'm interested. What is it? So he told me his story. He was doing a documentary about, it was an old military documentary. Had nothing to do with the paranormal at all. But he needed to film some scenes in a hospital. So he found out about a hospital that was going to be closing down in New Mexico. And part of the hospital was already shut down. So he was able to go in there and film his hospital scenes for his documentary without disturbing anybody because this part of the hospital is already shut down. It was going to be shutting down completely very shortly. As he's filming his documentary in this part of the hospital, strange things start happening to him during the filming. Cameras are shutting down for no reason. Elevator doors are opening and closing that nobody is using. Lights are flickering, different things are happening, and he doesn't know why. One time during one of the scenes, he's trying to film a really serious scene for the documentary, and he can hear babies crying. He asks the nurse, "Oh, is there a door you can close? Because I can hear the babies in the baby ward crying." And the nurse is like, "There are no babies in this hospital. We haven't had a baby ward in years." And he started interviewing people around the hospital, and they're all telling him their stories about the paranormal activity in this hospital. And he's like, wow, I should do a documentary about this hospital of all things. But he admitted to me, I don't know anything about paranormal. He's like, I've seen the TV shows. I don't want to do a TV show like that. I want it to be a straight documentary. He goes, I want it to be science-based. He goes, and you seem like someone who'd be a good consultant on this, being a paranormal investigator. He's, I see that you're very scientifically based and everything. So I was like, this is awesome. I would love to be a consultant on this. The hospital turns out to be a military hospital in Roswell, New Mexico.
Oh, geez.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Rumored to have been the hospital that they brought the bodies to from the famous Roswell crash at first, to see if they could save them or something. So anyways, he's telling me all the things that he wants to do. We end up making this into a thing where me and some of the friends from my paranormal group at the time, we're going to go down there and we're going to investigate this hospital. It's now been shut down. There's nobody in it anymore, but he has permission to film in there for a week. We're going to get to investigate this haunted hospital for a week. Now, I have always been of the belief that if there is one type of building that has paranormal activity the most, it's a hospital. It's the threshold to the other side, because people are obviously dying. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of emotions and sadness. A lot of paranormal things happen in hospitals. I've consulted many nurses, doctors, security guards, people that work at hospitals. They all have experiences like crazy. They just never talk about them. So I feel like if something's going to be paranormal, it's going to be a hospital. Now, many hospitals have been investigated, but they're always abandoned hospitals. They're always hospitals that have been closed for decades. This one just closed. So I'm thinking this is fresh. This is going to be a building that is used to having people in it, and now all of a sudden it doesn't. And when we go in there, it's going to be so active because we're back. There are people back, and it's going to like feel our energy. It's going to want to haunt again. It's going to want to do its things. So I'm like, this is the holy grail of paranormal investigation right here. We have to investigate this hospital for the week that we have it.
That's awesome.
But long story short, it came down to money. It was going to cost a lot of money. It cost money to fly us out there with our equipment. It cost us money for lodging. He's going to have to pay money for different types of equipment, pay people to carry cameras and stuff, to film the documentary, generators, all these things. We had a whole long laundry list of expenses, and none of us had the money for this. And, he's a documentarian, so he doesn't have a lot of money. And he reached out to some people that he knew in Hollywood, told them the situation, and they all wanted to turn it into the next Ghost Adventures or something. And he refused to do it, and we didn't want to be a part of something like that either. We went and tried a GoFundMe and tried to raise some money from that. We never got enough money, and we eventually ran out of time because the city had scheduled to demolish it. And we just got to the point where it didn't work out and the building was demolished. And to me, the biggest opportunity in this field of research came down to not having enough money to do it, unfortunately.
That sucks.
But I feel like, wow, we would have collected so much amazing data in that building, and it would have been in documentary form, and it's something that people could have watched and studied and learned from, and who knows. So yeah, that would have probably been my dream place of all places to investigate, but will never happen. Just in my dreams.
My house either. I always say the White House. I would love to investigate the White House.
A lot of stories in the White House.
Amityville is it for me.
Yep.
Too much stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, so much history there. Yeah.
And in the fact it's already been gutted. When you gut a place like that, stuff's gonna happen.
Oh yeah. One of the most popular common denominators of a haunting is when you do something to the property. You remodel, you knock down a wall, you add a room, you move the house 3 feet to the left, something like that. It always stirs things up for some reason. It's always one of the common denominators.
And
Yeah.
13 families want to be quiet about it because 13 families have lived in that house.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, unless there's nothing going on now,
I still think there is. They're just being hush hush
unless it
about
was like the people that were
Be,
haunted.
or it may have just moved on finally. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Like that house I lived in on Cemetery Street. The people said that nothing was happening to them. So
Right.
maybe things move on or dissipate, or maybe some people are just, not in tune to it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And then I guess the spirits lose interest if they're not in tune to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And they move
It's
on,
like, oh,
like you
well,
said.
these people aren't listening to me, so I give up. Who
Right.
knows what it is? It's such a phenomenon that you just don't know.
Right.
Wow. Well, this has been a fantastic interview. I got to have you back
Great.
on again.
It's been fun. One of you guys help out this Michael Biggs guy. He's looking for some help.
Yeah, I saw that. I wasn't sure if that was. I
I
don't
have
know.
to go back into the comments and read that.
Yeah.
But like I said, you guys have been watching the Paranormal Brew and BB3 TV networks. Also, if you don't have Facebook, you can join us on the I'm Just Paranormal YouTube channel. This is the last episode of the Paranormal Question of the Day for 2023. We'll be starting back up in January 4th. So I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Same.
And Tom, I'll let you close out the show with one of your stories.
Oh, I haven't told enough yet? I'll give you a little preview of what my next episode is going to be. I haven't recorded it yet, so I can't tell you when it's coming out. I'm trying to get it out before Christmas. We'll see what happens because I haven't put anything out in December yet. Last year, I got to do an investigation at an old mill that's been it's been turned into a bunch of different businesses now. But a friend of mine had been there for a function, and he got to talk to the owner. And we have a lot of old mills up here in New England, and my friend is very interested in the paranormal. So one of his first questions to the owner of this building was, "Hey, do you think it's haunted?" And the guy was like, "Well, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of different stories from different people who work here, and we all think it's haunted." And he was like, "Well, my friend Tom is a paranormal investigator. You should have him come in." So that's what ended up happening. I ended up getting in touch with a guy, and he's like, "Yeah, come on in and do an investigation." So we got to have the mill to ourselves for a whole night, and we got to hear all the different stories. One of the most common stories was people would see an apparition walking from what was the modern day break room to one of the offices on the other side of the building. Several witnesses of people would see this apparition go from left to right as if it was going from one part of the building to the other. There were stories of fires in the building. There were stories of children dying in the building because they used to use child labor back in the day. The owner of the place himself had many experiences. There was a night when he was working late and he was the only one in the building, and he could hear what he thought were some kids running around on the third floor above him, to the point where he literally called his wife and told her, "Call the police and tell them to get down here. I'm going upstairs to check on this with my baseball bat." And he thought he was going to, be hitting some kids with bats for trespassing into his building and hoping the police would get there in time. And when he went upstairs, there was nobody there. Just many, many stories like that. So he let us investigate, and we had some very interesting things happen. Two of the investigators who were with me were Cody and Satori. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they've had a lot of viral attention lately. I'm friends with them. I've investigated with them many, many times over the years. And they are famous for their knocking method, which they decided to use that night.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I want to say about that is this was just an investigation we were doing. It was private. There was no TV cameras. There was no YouTube channel. There was no going viral. It was no money involved, nothing. It was just an investigation.
Right.
So they did their knocking method, and they were able to get into touch with a spirit of a man who used to work in the mill many, many years ago. And he was able to tell us that there were many spirits still in the building, and that they were all aware of each other, and they were aware of the people in the building. And one of the stories that we were told was that newspapers and papers on people's desks would often get pushed off their desks onto the floor. And we asked him if that was him, if he was doing that. And he said no, but he did tell us that he could do that. So we asked him if he would do it for us, and he said he would try. So we set up a stack of like magazines, open magazines, and we put a camera on it for the night, and we went off and did our investigations and stuff. And sure enough, when we reviewed the video from that night, you can see one of the pages in the magazine starting to lift up as if somebody's trying to turn it over.
Wow.
And it doesn't quite make it, but that's the only time it does it. So I don't feel like a breeze would have done that.
Right.
We also had a K2 meter on the table in the exact spot, and that was the only time the K2 meter went solid red the entire night, was at the same exact time that page was moving. So we kind of chalked that up to being something.
Yeah.
We caught some EVPs, nothing we could understand, but definitely voices that we couldn't explain. When we were exploring the third floor, the top floor, this was the floor of the building that had never been redone. It was still original, all the old wood and everything. And I ended up discovering some drawings on the walls that we believe were drawn by the people who worked there many, many years ago, because it was very crude drawings. Looked like it might have been like of the foreperson. They were trying to make fun of him and his wife or something. Very interesting. I got pictures of all of that stuff that I'm going to put on my website when I release the episode. But the coolest thing, well, I don't know if coolest is the right word, but Cody and Satori were doing their knocking method, and somebody else came through, somebody who had nothing to do with the mill. And this isn't uncommon to happen around them. Quite often, a spirit will want to just talk to somebody who's in the room with them, and it has nothing to do with the property or the investigation itself. And I've seen this happen at least a bunch of times and can't explain it. So they ended up getting the name of some guy. We have no idea who this guy is. Long story short, he turns out to be somebody who went missing many years ago. And the owner's wife was the person who knew this guy. The owner's wife was not there with us. The owner of the building never knew this spirit that was contacting with us, but he wanted to give a message to this owner to give to his wife about where he ended up and why he was missing, because they had already had a funeral for this guy many, many years ago. They just assumed that he was dead, and it turned out to be sort of a true crime revelation there.
Wow.
That this spirit basically informed us what had happened to him. It was a big family mystery for many years, and the owner of the building, when he heard what the message was coming through, like, he was white as a ghost. His jaw was dropped. All of us were. We were just dumbfounded, like, holy cow.
How did they connect the dots if they didn't know the spirit?
Well, his name came through, and we like, okay, and who are you? Asking questions. And I have a message for so-and-so, the owner of the mill. I'm trying not to say names because it's very private.
Yeah.
And that's how I have to dance around it a little bit on my episode, is that, you know, I don't want this family's name to be released or where the mill is located or anything.
Yeah, no, you don't have to say names. I was just curious as to how.
So that's why I'm being vague. But it basically said, I have a message for so-and-so, the name of the mill owner. And he was like, I don't know anybody by that name. And then the spirit explained who he was, and then he knew because he remembered his wife telling him this story at one time. So this was something that you couldn't have looked up on the internet. This is not anything that any of us had any previous knowledge of. The only person in the room who knew anything about this guy going missing years ago was the owner. And he hadn't told us about it. It was probably something he hadn't thought about in a very long time. So it was like the spirit wanted to give a message to the family of what really did happen to them because they never knew. He just was a missing person for a long time. So that was what was just amazing about, I mean, the place was definitely haunted, but that was an amazing situation that just happened to have happened at that investigation.
Yeah, no, sounds cool.
with Cody and Satori. So yeah, I mean, so it's, to me, when I see all people trying to, say that they're faking things and that they're debunking and that they're frauds and everything, I have seen things that they have done that go beyond what you know. And
yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody can really say unless they're there,
That's exactly what I tell people. If you've never been there in person to see them do it, you just don't know. You can't really determine it through. Now, I'm a skeptical person. I'm very skeptical, was always skeptical of them. Believe me, I've studied them almost. I mean, I've put every piece of equipment I can around them when they're doing it. And I have been in the room when their knocking sounds are happening from the other room next to me. I've heard the knocking come through the room into the room with us. It's just an amazing thing that I can't explain. They can't explain it. And
that's what everybody says that does experience it.
Yeah.
They say
Anybody who's been in their presence and they've seen them do it, they're blown away because you're
It's
like,
paranormal
what is
magic.
happening? What is happening? It's, it's the same feeling you get that when like a medium tells you something about your life that nobody knows,
Right.
and it
Yeah.
just gives you that feeling of, oh my God, there's something strange here.
And here's the thing, I'm friends with her father, right? So, you know, knowing how involved he is with their lives, and he's a very good father. Family is first to him. There is like nothing above that. And for 20 years, I've looked up to him. You know what I mean? Like I totally respect how he investigates.
Me too. Many of us have.
He's a skeptic believer, like the rest of us. And for me, I guess it's a blind trust. Whereas I'm like, they may have found their own paths in the paranormal field, but he had a lot of influence in that. And I can guarantee you that he didn't, he taught them about integrity, because that's a big thing for him.
Cody and Satori, knocking method aside, they're excellent investigators.
Right.
I was investigating with Cody, I think, before he was even in a relationship with Satori. And both of them are excellent investigators. I mean, they're obviously known for the way they're able to communicate, but it's not much different from an investigator who believes that they're sensitive or believes that they're a medium. So, it's something that when you're a skeptic, you have a hard time believing it.
Yeah.
And I've seen them do it at least 7 or 8 times now. And I've seen them do it in places and at times when there was no need to. There was no benefit. There was nothing to gain at all.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they've come on investigations with me that were just investigations. We weren't filming it. It wasn't going to be put on YouTube. It wasn't going to be part of any kind of a viral thing or anything. They were just investigating, and that was just one of their methods of investigating. So, So
let's be
that's
honest,
I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole.
No. I mean, I'm glad we're talking about it because I'm on their side. I'm on your side. Like I totally.
Most people are, I think.
Yeah.
Most people.
It's a unique thing to see.
I mean, and even though Cody and Satori, have a huge following and this and that, but the skeptics, the ones that are going after them, are making them bigger than what they are. You know what I mean? Because
that's true.
More people are talking about them. More people, and that's
how the internet is. People want to use it to their own advantage to get attention, get likes, get subscribers, things like that. That's what I'm basically finding, because anybody who's a true investigator would know that unless you're experiencing it yourself, there's really nothing credible you can say about it. You know what I mean? You can cherry pick videos that you see online and blow things up and slow things down. Unless you're there in person, you really don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, the only thing I would say about that is, like, if somebody is investigating a place that you've been to, so you kind of know the layout, the lay of the land, the noises in the building, how, what some things do and don't do. You could give a critique about a video or something like that, but you can't critique an experience somebody has, because again, you're not there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, you can give your opinion, what you think might be going on, and, critique it if you feel like it. But for some people to just come right out and say things like they're faking it, it's a fraud, it's a scam, or whatever, you haven't been in their presence, so you can't really say. You just don't know. Right. And I have, and it blows me away.
Yeah. I'm sure. I would love to experience it. I would love to.
Even when they're not using that method, I thoroughly enjoy investigating with them. They're such good kids. They're really smart when it comes to paranormal. I mean, both of them grew up with it, especially Satori. I mean, her father's been doing it her whole life.
Yeah.
They're excellent investigators and researchers. And I was so glad that they came on that investigation with me, because I think we actually helped that family
Yeah, that's
because
awesome.
that what happened, you know? And
Yeah.
like I was saying earlier, that's really what it's all about is you wanna be able to help people,
Yep.
and I think we did that night. I think we gave a family some answers that were lifelong questions that they were having in their life, you know?
And it validated. You know what I mean? All that
Mhm.
information validated that they got. How would they get
Yep.
that?
Yeah. I mean, how would you even know? I mean, I don't even know if they knew where they were going that night. I think they would just like, "Oh yeah, we'll come," you know? And it was like, you know, so it's not like they had time to go home and research this guy's family and, you know, and all
Yeah,
this other stuff. You know, I mean, I did research and I didn't find any of that information. So to
right,
me, it had to be legit because I don't see any other way.
right,
Right.
right. Uh,
Wow.
I mean, I believe in them, so you know, it's just you know, I hope I get to work with them one day. That's
Yeah,
cool.
that's good to hear. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're really cool. They're really good kids and, love them to death, and, but they've had a hard time with this viral thing. The
I'm
internet's
sure.
brutal,
I'm
man.
sure people are mean and people are
Yep.
like, you know, and that's the other thing too. Cody's been through a lot, leukemia, bone marrow transplant.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm.
he's a strong kid. You know, and
He really is.
yeah, and you know, I just it's a sin that you know people just because honestly nobody bothered them before. You know, nobody
Mm,
bothered what they did. They've been doing this
no.
for years. Nobody
Yeah.
ever said anything about it, and all of a sudden boom.
Yep,
You know, all it
yep,
takes is one person, and then
yeah,
every skeptic is gonna jump on it.
yep,
Yeah.
and
One
I saw it coming as soon as I saw that they were on that, YouTube show.
and that's the problem.
I that exact day when it came out, like, literally hours after I saw it come out, I texted Cody and I was like, "Buckle up. It's about to get
Well,
bumpy
and then
because
that's the
this is
thing,
gonna
you
go
gotta
viral, kid,"
yeah,
and
and
it
you
sure
gotta be
did.
careful, and I'm not saying that this is their fault. I'm just saying this is why I'm
Mhm,
so careful about who I work with and who I don't work with, and the second
mhm,
that integrity is in question, I'm out, because that's the
mhm,
biggest thing for me. So,
mhm,
I could never work with people that do the things that they do. You know what I mean? Like if
mhm.
what they're doing on YouTube is what they're doing, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
do I agree with it? Absolutely not. But you know what? I mean, there's 100,000 people that watch and love what they do,
Yeah.
right?
They're
Mhm.
entertainers and, you know, there's a
That's
place
it.
for them, there's a place for everybody. I
Yeah.
mean, if they
It's like
wanted me to go on their show, I would go on their show. I
yeah,
wouldn't care. I like entertaining.
yeah.
But,
Right.
I wouldn't.
you know, but
But like
I
I
can't
would
read cue cards.
but like
but, you
it's
know,
like the real paranormal person. Yeah,
someone's always gonna be out there to attack you because, you
yeah.
know, they're jealous, they're envious, you
Oh,
know,
for sure.
it happens. So,
Yeah.
you know.
It's like us real investigators are UFC and then they're like WWE. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like they're like
Yep,
the fake, they're like the
yep,
soap opera,
yep.
you know.
I've gotten hate mail from my podcasts here and
I
there.
was gonna ask you that. I was gonna ask you
People
that.
saying, you know, "Oh, you weren't really in the station nightclub fire," or, you know, "Nobody called your name," and, you know, people just questioning my stories, and I'm just like, "Okay, like, why did you feel the need to tell me that?" You know, like, if
Yeah.
you don't
I,
believe it, then don't believe it. I mean,
Yeah,
you
who
don't have to
cares?
believe everything you hear or read, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I believe in the thing is if you don't have anything good to say, then don't say it or
Oh,
don't
nobody
Yeah.
type
believes
it.
that anymore.
Well, miserable people wanna bring you down to their level, and,
Yeah.
that's something I had to learn along the way is to not let myself, you know, get triggered by it.
Yeah,
Just
Right.
just
yeah.
keep doing your thing, and the people who appreciate you will find you, and you know, and they'll show the love.
Absolutely. I
Well
agree.
said. Well said.
All right.
Well, we are at that point. We're almost 2 hours in.
Wow.
So
There you go.
great conversation. Definitely gonna have you back on. And like I said, that's Taryn. That's Tom. And follow him on My Paranormal Story. I'm Darren. I will see you next year. I bid you adieu. So long, everybody.
Sayonara, suckers.